All right, the time is 7:30. I will call this meeting of the Yardley Borough Council to order. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Marianne, if you could take our roll call.
Ms. Thompson,
Present.
Ms. Siegel Morris,
Here.
Mr. Ross,
Here.
Mr. Feiner,
Here.
Mr. McCann,
Here.
Mr. Curtin,
Present.
and Mr. Brea.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. 7 council members in attendance. That constitutes a quorum. We're also joined by Mayor Harding this evening. Before we get started, at the top, we have our portion of the meeting for community announcements. So I'll offer this time first for any member of council. If you have an item you wish to share for the community, just unmute yourself and go ahead.
I have an item on behalf of the Community Outreach Committee. 2 items, actually.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, the first is we have the resignation of Peter Guadamo, excuse me, for, and I just wanted to, so she's trying to, sorry, I have a document here that I'm unable to get up here that lists some of his, sorry, he's had extensive service in the borough. And I wanted to go over some of those items and I'm unable to locate that. So I'll just say in summary, we appreciate many years of service to the borough. We thank him for contributing on so many different levels. And we wish him well in the future. And the same goes for Tom Cadwallader, who is resigning from the Sewer Authority. And we will also thank him as well as Catherine Cadwallader for her service and just appreciate. He's one of the people has contributed just countlessly over decades to the borough, and we just greatly appreciate when people step up and put their time and energy into making our lives better at the borough through their own act of volunteering and goodwill. So we thank him, wish him well. And I believe that we have some recognition certificates going out to them. So I guess they'll be contacted regarding those.
All right, great. Thank you. Have any other community announcements this evening?
Yeah, David, I'll mention we're still fundraising for the Mary Yardley Bridge. That is still open. You go to fodc.org. Thanks for all those people that donated.
Yes, thank you for that reminder, John. I can vouch for him. They are in fact fundraising. I got a call myself. So if you'd like to contribute to this project, reach out to John or anyone else on the committee. All right, any other announcements from council? And hearing none, I'll turn it over if there are any community announcements from members of the public. Use the raise hand feature to be acknowledged. I'm scrolling through, I don't see any. So we will close the community announcement portion of the meeting and move on to public comment. Public comment is the portion of the meeting during which members of the public may address council regarding items that do not appear on the agenda. If you wish to address council regarding one of our agenda items, you will be given the opportunity to do so during council's deliberation of that particular business item. Members of the public are asked to please state their name and address for the record before making their comment. And because we are in Zoom setting, to be acknowledged, please make use of the raise hand feature, which you can find by clicking the participants icon at the bottom of your screen. Of course, if that fails, you can turn on your video and wave at us traditionally, and we should catch that. All right, scrolling through, we will begin with Dawn Perlmutter. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hi, Dawn Perlmutter, 18 West College Avenue. I just wanted to mention, when I applied for the Civil Service Commission, I discovered some things, and after having my interview this evening, I discovered some more things. The Civil Service Commission's, when I researched it, it's a very important board. It oversees the hiring and promotions of the Yardley Borough police officers. And I discovered that there's very specific state rules and regulations, not only for the administration of the commission, but also including appointments of officers to the commission, and of course, duties and record keeping. So I discovered that there's nothing, I couldn't find anything in Yardley Borough ordinance. So I spoke to Paula and Yuri about it earlier, and just realized that we do not have that codified. I think it's really important that we do that. Also, I would like to mention that some of you may not be aware that there was a lawsuit in 1989 filed by our former chief of police, James O'Neill. He had applied for the position of chief while he was a sergeant with the Yardley Borough Police Force. It was a really nasty lawsuit, and of just a lot of problems with people were very upset in town. And this occurred because of the Civil Service Committee and the council. I think it's one of the reasons we really need to codify this. And just one other thing that I discovered is that Pennsylvania statutes under Title 8, subchapter J, section 1172, the Civil Service Commission, there's very specific rules, including offices incompatible with the Civil Service Commission. And last month, when Brian Marshall resigned from the commission, Borough Council voted to replace him with Brian Welch. Mr. Welch is currently an auxiliary police officer with the Yardley Borough Police Department. An officer, whether it's full-time, part-time, or auxiliary, is not allowed to be a member of the Yardley Borough Commission that hires and promotes officers in the same department. It's an obvious conflict. So I'm just thinking the borough and maybe Mr. Welch may be opening themselves up for the same kind of lawsuits we've already had. And I'm just asking that maybe you might want to look into this and keeping it with state laws regarding the commission.
All right, thank you for that comment. Thank you for flagging that issue. We will certainly make sure that the Civil Service Commission, which does have its own separate solicitor, takes a look to make sure that there are no conflicts in its present structure.
Thank you.
I'll just add to that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And I just want to add that since we had our meeting earlier, in terms of the codification of the ordinance, just to clarify that what happens is that the ordinances go in, but there's only, we don't republish them. It's an outside company that does that. So to save on expenses, we don't republish that every time there's a new ordinance. It happens once a year, and there may be a supplemental time that happens. So what we'll be doing is uploading those to the website before they're actually in the main part of the code, so that as soon as they pass, they'll be posted there. And then eventually at the next time that is all put together, that it'll be taken off of that and put into the main bunch. So that's the ordinance you're talking about is one of those, and it will be there soon enough. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment this evening? Going once, going twice, hearing none, I will close the public comment portion of the meeting. Our next agenda item is consideration of tonight's consent agenda. Nice and easy tonight, and only contains 2 items, which are approval of the minutes from our December 1st meeting and approval of the bills list for tonight, December 15th. Would any member of council like one of those items considered separately? All right, hearing none, is there a motion for approval of tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion is made by Mr. McCann, seconded by Ms. Thompson. Are any discussion or questions from council? Discussion or questions from the public? All right, hearing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries 7-0. Next item is a report from our Chief of Police. Chief, you're on mute there.
All right, I think I'm back. Two quick items, Mr. President. First is I'd like to thank both Experienced Yardley and the Spearhead Group for their very generous donation of masks that will carry us probably for the next year, surgical masks. The second item is due to the pending storm tonight, actually the pending storm tomorrow, we'll be posting no parking tonight as we normally do on South Main Street and on East Afton Avenue. The signs will be posted overnight because that's the easiest way to do it. We will not begin enforcing them till about 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. And that will allow our plows to get through. Anytime we anticipate over 2 to 3 inches, we post those areas to keep those streets clear for plows. So I'll be putting something on social media about that. And that concludes my report, sir.
Thank you. Any members of council have questions for Chief Kelly? All right, hearing none, we will move on. Next is our engineer's report.
Hi there, can everyone hear me? Wonderful. All right, I really don't have much tonight. I don't have any updates different from the report that you all received. Unless there are any specific questions about anything under the general updates, we can go right into the projects.
Hearing none, go ahead.
Alrighty, I have no current updates on Main and Afton. We're just waiting for PennDOT to schedule the final walkthrough. Hopefully that happens soon. Then Mary Yardley Bridge, we received contact from DVRPC, which is the latest grant that we applied for, and they've asked for an updated budget. And so we're working through that, but it seems like they believe we have a strong application. So that's boding well, and we're moving through that. We are getting the additional survey work on the schedule that should be occurring soon. And I think that's about it for Mary Yardley at this point in time. Pico property, I believe the offer letter was sent out to Pico, Paula? Yeah, okay. So just waiting to hear back on that, but we will continue to go through the process with DCNR to do all that we can to make sure that our grant application in April is the best that it can be. And then last, we have North Main Street sidewalk. Paula cut the check that we requested at the last meeting, and that will be sent out with our ENS permit. And we are moving right on through the HOP. So that moving along well. We are still on schedule to have the construction drawings finished by early next year.
All right, thank you. Any members of council have questions for our engineer? All right, hearing none, we will move on to the main attraction this evening. Ms. Johnson, if you want to take it away and begin some of our budget discussion.
All right. So tonight, as you are all aware, we are here to present the 2021 budget for consideration of adoption by council. As you all know, 2020 brought a lot of unexpected financial challenges to Yardley Borough with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic caused a revenue deficit of approximately $54,000. Just lost my train of thought. Real estate transfer taxes are down, their fines, violations were down, police services were down, inspection fees were down. So as a result, we had to even defer some expenses that we anticipated doing this year, such as improvements to Borough Hall, the annex, roof, Mary Yardley Bridge, a police car. We anticipated on transferring approximately $37,000 to our emergency fund, which we highly recommend not doing this year because of this deficit. So we've been working on this budget with general government, Patty Sargent, who's our financial assistant, and I since probably late spring, early summer. We listened to residents who reached out to us with suggestions. We met with one resident who asked to have a meeting with us. We didn't take this lightly, but it does have a 4 mil increase. And that's about it. Sorry.
All right. So the motions regarding the budget, there are 2 votes that need to take place tonight. One is adoption of the 2021 budget. The second would be the adoption of the 2021 tax levy. Although those are separate votes, they are of course tied very closely together. So first on our agenda is the adoption of the 2021 budget. So I will ask council for a motion at this time.
I'll move that council adopt the 2021 budget as presented most recently.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Ms. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Ross for adoption of the 2021 budget. Let's begin with questions or comments from members of council.
David, I'll start. So look, no fun coming in here and suggesting this, although we have had a lot of dialogue. Clearly a lot of thought has gone into it, and I appreciate coming into this late, but being welcomed in to provide feedback and all the time that people spent with me to get educated on our finances. I think my view is that, the budgeting in the borough for a long time, and I've been a resident for a long time, has been very budget to break even, which I do think there's a lot of merit to it. We're spending our residents' money. And so when you do that, you need to justify every expense that you make, right? And so there's a lot of merit to budgeting that way and to planning that way. I think the problem is that over time, a lot of things that are discretionary that get pushed to next year or the following year eventually become absolutely or very damn close to completely necessary. And you also don't have reserves for unanticipated things that come up. And as we all know here, we do have a disproportionate amount of those due to our high proportion of homes in the floodplain and our exposure to, flood issues periodically. And so, looking from the outside in, I do think previous councils and Manager Johnson and her predecessors have done a good job of trying to manage with, a kind of cash in, cash out, break even type scenario. And I think we've done a good job with that. But I think we're lacking revenue. And, the main issue, and we talked about this on another previous council meeting, is that, the biggest portion of our budget is for the police force and for our, employees. And there are reasonable and very standard and necessary cost of living adjustments that flow through a budget every year, right? Our expenses go up with inflation or beyond every year, but our taxes remain relatively constant, right? Because they're based on millage, which is not, reassessed. And so in our minds, while it's not ideal, particularly the timing, I think this is important for 2 reasons. I think one, the 2 mils to the general fund, I think really supports us with the ability to not only break even, but also address some of our historical maintenance and necessary expenses that we have ignored. And I think the 2 mils to the capital fund, put us in a position where, we will have reserves to do a lot of the long-term projects that are necessary, that may be discretionary in any one particular year, but over the course of time, we need to do to have sustainable government and a sustainable community. So, I definitely think we can debate, and I think we should, some of the assumptions that went into the budget. And I do think it is reasonable to assume that we may be over or under by $10,000 either way in terms of how you actually end up from year to year. But I would suggest that there are enough needs for our community in terms of investment for the long term, that even if we have overshot slightly between our need to invest and the cost of living increases that are inherently going to happen, this is important. So thank you for the time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Curtin. I think that was a very good summary of the thought process behind this budget and what we're looking at this year. Just on a sort of higher process level, I just want to make note of the fact that I said this before and I'll say it again, that the format of our budget has come a long way in a few years, and that's thanks to the hard work from our manager, Paula Johnson, Patty Sargent, our finance assistant, and the general government committee. I remember looking at my first budget 3-4 years ago now, and it was hard to decipher. And a lot of that was because of the way the information was presented. So I just want to say thank you for all of the work that went into making this a document that can be understood.
I'd just like to add, first of all, just to thank the General Government Committee, Caroline Thompson and Matt Curtin and Paula and Patty, and the other people who contributed to this. You've really done a fabulous job of not just assembling the budget, but also keeping a tight lid on expenses to the extent that it's possible. And look, you can, as Matt said, you can only get so far. You can try to make things cost less and less, which to make them cost the same is really to make them cost less because the prices go up. So there's just no, there's a point of diminishing returns where you can't get any further. And I think that we get to this place where no one's going to have everything, everyone's going to give something. The ideal win for the residents, for all of us, is to say, okay, there's no increase. We don't have to pay anymore. And that would be the ultimate win. And the ultimate win for the borough is to be able to get all of Borough Hall fixed and all the infrastructure, and can't do that either. So there has to be a balance. And I'm very confident with the balance that was struck here. That said, nobody wants a tax increase during a time of a pandemic, and I think that's something that I feel at liberty to share that probably everybody in council feels that way. But you get to a point where there's no other option, and I think given that, I think this is the responsible thing to do. It'd be very easy to kick the can down the road, and that wouldn't be right for the future, and that would cost us in the future. I also want to point out, and we discussed this, I discussed this with Matt Curtin about Yardley Walk. There's an issue there because those buildings are new, and therefore they were assessed at a later time than most of the property in the borough, which is old. And so they kind of have a disproportionate tax burden relative to the actual value of their property. And there's really nothing we can do about it that I'm aware of. And we looked into some of that because we don't control the assessment of properties. At some point, the way that things are going in the next number of years, they probably will be a reassessment, or there'll be some sort of EIT type school tax, not coming from us, but there will be no other way to pay for the school. So when that happens, and we'll cross that road when we get there. But at this point, the way that the tax works, that there's just no other way to do that. And I will say also that clearly the residents of Yardley don't want an EIT, and some of the residents from Yardley Walk actually may verbalize that when that was under consideration. That would have evened the playing field. So that's off the table for at least, for the time being, and until it's forced upon us, if that should happen. I looked at those properties when they were first built. They were quite nice. And I was amazed at the cost of the taxes. Like, wow, that's a big tax hit. And so to some extent, I think it's baked into the cost. And it happens in a lot of communities that new construction is built and it has additional tax costs for infrastructure or whatever. And I kind of see it that way, but in any case, I just want to say that I acknowledge it. It's unfortunate that that community, as a result, has to pay more per person than other areas based on the value of their house, the actual true value of their house. So it's acknowledged, and yet there's nothing we can do about it.
David, I wanted to kind of mention some thoughts. I first want to reiterate the points. I think people did fantastic work on the budget, put a lot of effort into it. And the only points I'll raise is philosophically, I'm not anti-tax. I know it's important to raise incrementally over the years, that the cost of salaries and all the things that we find important here in the borough should be supported. So I agree with that principally. The timing for me is tough. It is a global pandemic. There are members of the community that are struggling. It's a regressive tax. So those types of things for me weigh, and I look at some of the things cited. A lot of these capital improvement projects, we have that opportunity for the line of credit. Interest is really cheap right now. I would still prefer those things cited to use that line of credit now where interest rates are really low, or offer up something on the other side, like getting rid of the per capita tax or some type of tax that is kind of a nuisance tax, where you can still gain some revenue. So that is still a concern for me. And I would have probably liked to seen us utilize that line of credit more fully for some of those improvement projects cited. And then, things are going to get better. The economy will rebound. And I do believe that you'll see a return of some of that lost revenue from the past. You could even see it with the real estate market really picking up. The last couple months, things have been selling really quickly. So those are the considerations. And I know people did fantastic work, and I appreciate it. And the budget people have worked really hard on it. I would have just, personally thinking about the timing, the line of credit for some of these projects, would have been preferable to me.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say a few things. So I think a lot of people wonder what our neighbors are doing as we're considering an increase. Sorry for those who are on the general government meeting. This might be a bit repetitive for you, but our neighbors in Newtown Township are introducing an 8 mil increase to their taxes on top of the 1% EIT that they have. Our other neighbors either raised last year, plan to raise next year, or they have an EIT in place. So I don't think we're that far off base from what others in the community surrounding us are doing. We do expect ongoing distress to our income lines next year. The pandemic isn't over. Vaccine availability will be limited for some time. So we do expect the lines, the non-tax incomes will not recover until maybe mid-year next year. This tax increase was expected even before the pandemic hit. So if you saw our presentation last year and reviewed our budget last year, we had a projected net income in 2020 of $400. We cannot move into a new year with cost of living increases when we only projected a net income of $400 this year. So we need to cover those cost of living increases, cover the deficit we have this year, and plan for the future. So I think this budget really accomplishes something that Yardley Borough has fallen short in doing in previous administrations, and that is planning, and saving. And we are doing that in this budget. And we also hope not to raise taxes every year. So this tax increase should cover us for some time so that we won't have to break your heart again next year right before the holidays. So those are my thoughts. I mean, I will respond just quickly to John's point about the line of credit. It's a drawdown line of credit. We do not anticipate using all of it. And we certainly did not secure it to help balance our checkbooks and pay routine bills. The capital projects aren't really built into this budget. We do plan to use that line of credit, but we have to pay it back. So we have to have the means to pay it back within our income streams. And this budget helps us accomplish that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from council on the budget? All right. Before we move to public comment on the budget, I just want to add For myself, I'm very much in agreement with everyone else here that I understand the difficulty in facing a decision about an increase in an economic climate like this one. But I do return to the fact that it was something we discussed a year ago, built it into our plan then. But what I really return to is every time I've gone through this budget to look at what could we cut, I get to the end of that document not having found those magic numbers. And that's, in my opinion, because they're not there. This budget is tight. There is not waste in it. Everyone who's worked on it has done a really good job keeping expenses in check while also planning. And I think it's what it is. I looked one more time tonight at about 6:15, one more scroll through just to make sure. And, in my opinion, if we were to look at no increase, I don't know how we would balance it on the expense end. And with that, I will turn it over to public comment. If any member of the public wishes to comment on the budget, please use the raise hand feature. And I'll begin with David Applebaum.
Yes, hi, Mr. President. I heard all the comments. I just want to say fantastic job to everyone involved in putting this budget together. The comment from Councilwoman Thompson that about breaking our hearts, I want to say that my heart is not broken. The people involved have done a fantastic job, and if this is what we need to do to get by through this next year and some future years, then that's what has to be done, because it would really break my heart if we didn't have a balanced budget moving into this next year. So thank you. I'll mute myself.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Mr. Don Carlson.
Yeah, Don Carlson, 14 Creek View. I'm one of the few people who was able to see the budget line item by line item who's not part of the council, and I just wanted to share my thoughts on it. A 4 mil hit is 16.1%. So you're asking us all to take a 16% increase in our local taxes. And I'm not a person who says we shouldn't ever raise taxes, but I think we got to look at how the budget was built and what the numbers are in there. And I believe looking at it, there's a lot of conservatives. And I'm just going to focus on one line item in it. And the line I'm going to focus in is the transfer tax, real estate transfer tax. Budgeted for this year was $91,000 in income. And through November, we're at 84.9, so basically 85,000. And if December ends up like October and November, you'll end transfer tax revenues at 94, 3,000 higher than budget. It was just a little contrary to what we heard before, but I think you're going to hit 94 easy. And then for next year, the comments on the budget has been dropped down to 74,000, I think it is. No, 77,300. An 18% drop in expected revenue from real estate transfers. And the realtors that I've talked to, and there's some on this call, hopefully can pipe in too, with interest rates being so low, the market's booming now, and there's no reason to think that next year is going to be lower than this year. So all I'm asking is, if you budgeted next year's real estate transfer at this year's actuals, that would save you over $20,000, and that's 0.6 of a mil right there. So that's not taking any hardship away from anybody. That's just being not so conservative on the budget. So I think there's a lot of conservative on the budget in a few other areas too. And then on the and there's some areas on the cost side. My belief is that yes, you need at least a mil increase, of course. But doing, and the capital budgets, capital projects, doing all 2 mils at once seems like a big bite. 8% increase just for the capital. I think a more conservative approach would be to do a 2 mil increase, and you can balance the budget with a 2 mil increase if you take just looking at transfer tax almost does it. So that's my opinion. I think there's good details in there, and when I've discussed any line items with the council members, I understand the answers. I just get the feeling that there's a conservative push in it. And I I believe there is another option. You're not that there's no other option. There is another option to look at this budget and still meet the needs. I am not in favor of doing big budget increases every few years as opposed to re-looking at it every year. I think it's much fairer to do little ones every year if you have to, that are in line with cost of living or special projects that come out, rather than do a big chunk. It's not fair to the people who are moving in or out of the town. They get screwed in the year that they come in, and there happen to be the year when we do the big increase. So I think it's better to do little ones. I know it's tough to sell them, but it's fair to do it that way. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. I do just want to note for the record quickly with real estate transfer taxes. I know that when that concern was initially raised, the budget was then adjusted. So that number has come up since the initial draft. I think we're around 90,000 for the year, which certainly helps chip away at that initial deficit, but by no means closed it.
Can I respond to that just briefly?
Go ahead.
Well, just one thing I want to clarify, because sometimes people get confused. Percentages is, if you look at the whole percentage that we pay, I think we're talking about like a 3.5% increase, something like that is what the actual amount is in terms of the municipal tax versus our overall school municipal per capita, all the taxes that we pay as a package. So so that ends up being, I'm not saying it's not nothing. And of course, people who are living on a, paycheck to paycheck, very tight budget are impacted, and there's no way of covering that. But it just depends on how you look at it. As far as annual increases, that's an approach that I think could make sense. But then where was it the last 4 years? So the problem is, if you don't do it, you got to catch up. And the last increase was, I think, 2016. So when you don't do it more often, you lose that extra mill you would have gotten for a few more years. And then and it seems that the way it works is we're always just trying to catch up. And there's never really a situation where we can say, okay, let's have an extra few mills for the future. Is what it is, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Feiner. All right, do we see any other public comment on the budget this evening? I see a hand from Dr. Perlmutter. Go ahead.
Hi, I just would like to say, you said that you've tightened your budget as much as possible, but I've been coming to every single meeting, and what I've observed is that there's a tremendous amount of outsourcing for consultants that take up a lot of money. Outsourcing that really used to be done by the borough manager. We have a separate position for treasurer that we never had before. The police department's budget has increased significantly, but yet the population and the crime hasn't increased. So I think that things can be tightened, and that maybe is the reason why there were no increases in the past years. So I think that it's a bad time to do this. This is the worst year in a lot of people's lives. And I just think that maybe we should try to just cut back more and stop outsourcing numerous jobs.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other comments this evening? All right, hearing and seeing none, I will then call the question on the 2021 budget. For the record, Marianne, if you could just do a roll call on this vote.
Was there, did I miss the motion?
Yes, I think.
Oh, yes, sorry, we did that. I apologize.
All that time ago.
Ms. Thompson,
Aye.
Ms. Siegel-Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Ross,
Aye.
Mr. Feiner,
Aye.
Mr. McCann,
Nay.
nay?
Yes,
Okay.
nay.
Thank you. Mr. Curtin
Aye.
and Mr. Bria.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The budget passes with a vote of 6-1. Moving on, part 2 of this process is adoption of the 2021 tax levy ordinance. Do we hear a motion to that effect?
I move to adopt the 2021 tax levy ordinance, which is number 488.
Second.
Motion was made by Ms. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Ross. And just very quickly, before we open up this for discussion, I will note that although it is a second motion that you may debate just as much as the first, just to be mindful that we don't have a repeat of the entire conversation we just had. So with that said, is there any discussion from council regarding the tax levy ordinance? Hearing none, any discussion from the public on the tax levy ordinance? Okay, seeing none, I'll call a question. And once again, just for the record, Marianne, if we can do a roll call.
Ms. Thompson,
Aye.
Ms. Siegel Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Ross,
Aye.
Mr. Finer,
Aye.
Mr. McCann,
Nay.
Mr. Curtin,
Aye.
and Mr. Bria.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion carries 6-1. Congratulations, everybody. We have a budget. Paula, any other items on the manager's report this evening?
Unmute. Nope, nothing else.
All right, thank you. With that, we will move on to Mr. Closser for a solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, but I don't have any report this evening, so you can keep moving.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is report from Mayor Harding.
Thank you, President Bria. I had like 17 things, but to stick with Bucky, I'll just say no report tonight and we'll go on, we'll keep it moving, so.
All right, thank you. Next agenda item are council member reports. We'll begin with Mr. Curtin.
Yep, so two things on the Environmental Advisory Commission. Their meeting will be tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. This is the combined November, December meeting, given the holidays that occur in the regular scheduled time. So that'll be tomorrow at 7. And as it relates to Reading Avenue, we had not mentioned the good work that the committee had done in early November. There was a significant amount of work done on a volunteer basis on the second Saturday of the month, pruning, removing vines, cleaning out a significant amount of underbrush, and really making a difference in terms of the aesthetic and the long term of that. So really just an update for everybody and a thank you for the efforts that were put in, in that regard.
Thank you. On Mr. Ross.
Liz took care of all the public works issues, so nothing to report.
You, Ms. Siegel Morris.
Nothing to report this evening, thanks.
Thank you. For myself, in regards to the sewer authority, Mr. Finer mentioned earlier that Tom Cadwallader has resigned from the sewer authority. So we will be taking applications to fill that position. In the past, council has conducted interviews with applicants for that board. And just as a review, the members of the sewer authority are appointed by council. But beyond that, the sewer authority is an independent body separate from the borough that essentially maintains and deals with the finances regarding the sewer system. So given the importance of that, although your sewage bill is not a tax, it might as well be, with the impact that it certainly has on everybody's bottom line. I think it would be appropriate for council to interview the applicants for that position once they start rolling in. So we don't have a schedule for that, but I think we could probably discuss that in the new year. Next is Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. So we did have our first floodplain seminar on Wednesday evening. It was well attended, went really well, and we're looking forward to the next one that Councilman Curtin is leading next month. I'd also like to ask Council's permission to start a new initiative. So we have talked about replacing the wreaths in the borough in the past. They're looking pretty sad, but we're never going to find that money in a tight budget, and it's hard to justify that. So the wreaths themselves are actually in pretty good shape. They have good color. They're very full. It's just the ornaments on them that need replacing. So I would like to start and adopt a wreath program where families in the borough can take a wreath or two home, and or individuals, doesn't have to be a family, decorate them. We can come up with a color palette that they can use so they look somewhat complementary, and then return them to the borough. The thought is they can buy ornaments on sale at the end of the season. So since they are a borough asset, I did want to ask your permission to loan out the wreaths before we begin that program in January, or get your general thoughts on that.
I love it. I think that's probably a smart idea. Buy on sale stuff once we're past the season. So any other thoughts from members of council on that?
Sounds great. I got a bunch of Christmas ornaments and Christmas decorations, so I can certainly donate, and we'd love to take part. So that's a great idea.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Moving on, Mr. McCann.
Yeah, just because it's our last council meeting of this year. Happy holidays to everyone celebrating holiday now and in the future. And also just mention, give shout out, because someone mentioned it earlier. The Shade Tree Committee did fantastic work in November. I got a brand new cherry tree in my backyard. I had to cut down some ash trees that were infected. So they do a great job of just beautifying the borough. And that program, they do offer trees to borough residents. So it's a fantastic program, and they do really good work. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Finer, and then I see there's a couple public comments, so we'll circle back on those. Or go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't have anything. I'm sorry, what was the?
No, I just said we'll go to your report before we circle back.
Oh, okay. Yes, sorry. No, I already had mine earlier, so I'm good to go. Thank you.
All right, so let's begin then, Ms. Taylor first.
Hi, regarding the wreaths, as I remember, the thing missing on those wreaths is the bow.
You would like bows added? I think we can do that.
No, I'm not saying that. When you look at the wreaths, there's a gap and a bow filled in that gap. So rather than doing a hodgepodge of ornaments, why don't we just put the bows back, fill in the gap, and be done with it? So there's uniformity.
So the ornaments are really miscolored. Some are broken. So I think there's more issues than just putting a bow back. Also, talking about, time spent. We all know if we use bows in our Christmas ornaments or our holiday ornaments that they get, they don't last very long. So unless we want to replace them every year.
There are a whole lot of plastic bows out there that last a long time. My very basic concern about this is that there is uniformity in the wreaths that look around town. Each and every wreath shouldn't look like a different wreath unless you're going to say, yes, we're going to have 25 different wreaths in Yardley Borough and they represent these families.
Let's chat offline. I'd love to get more of your thoughts. I'll email you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. I see a comment from Dr. Perlmutter.
Thanks. I meant to ask the chief this. Do you know if the Hanukkah parade is still on tomorrow? It was scheduled for, I think, 1:30. Does anybody know if it's still on at West College?
Chief, if you were speaking, you were muted there.
We received late notification from the school after an inquiry today that it is canceled due to inclement weather.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then Mr. Applebaum.
Yes, Councilman Thompson, I have a question and a request. And getting back on topic of the wreaths. How many total wreaths are there?
I do not know. There are probably over 40 though.
Okay, 40. I will commit Experience Yardley to, I'll take 10.
That's great. Thank you, David.
Just get in touch with me. And then I also volunteer Susan to head the committee to, for this project. No, I'm just kidding, Susan.
All right, all right.
Hey, I'll take it on.
All right, thank you. I believe the point we're at, that concludes council member reports. We have no other agenda items this evening. So unless a member of council has an item they'd like to raise now, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, that motion was made by Mr. Ross, seconded by Mr. McCann. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Happy New Year.
Be safe.
Bye.
Be safe tomorrow.